Started after spending time talking with community members. I had a lot of discussions as I went through the process of the board's decision to hire me permanently as the superintendent. What I came out from in that context is 3 points of emphasis I gave our teachers and staff this year. And I said, number one, let's make students first. In every decision we make, we want our teachers and our faculty, our staff, to think about what's best for students. And it's easy to get away from that when you're in the public schools because there are so many regulations, there are so many rules. It's so easy to say, well, we're stuck with this parameter. But I tell you, and I mentioned this at the table just a minute ago, sometimes that bridge that you want to cross is out, but there's another bridge somewhere upriver or downriver where you can achieve the same purpose. So that's what I meant by students first. Think about students first, and then let's try to figure out how we can achieve that goal with students first. The second thing I mentioned to our teachers is I wanted them to develop empathy. Our community is changing. We have a lot of diversity. And the diversity is growing. And I'm not just talking about racial diversity, I'm talking about geographic diversity, international diversity, diversity of thought, right? Our community is a very vibrant, moving community. And I emphasize to our teachers that you need to know where your students are coming from. It may be something as awful as their parents can't feed them on a daily basis, and they need to know that their students may not have had breakfast that morning. We do have folks in our community who suffer through that. It may be that what I think of as Southernisms or Americanisms might make no sense to somebody who just moved to this country. Like how often do you all say, I'm going to stop beating that dead horse, right? You know, things like that sometimes a child might not get because they haven't heard that phraseology. So we emphasize, second, to our faculty, have empathy for your students and know where they're coming from so that you don't inadvertently interfere with their ability to receive instruction. And the third thing I emphasize to all our faculty and staff this year is don't go it alone. We have a lot of wonderful people in the district, and I served as deputy superintendent and general counsel for 7 or 8 years before becoming superintendent about a year ago. And every day, I have that emphasized to me, that we have a lot of great people in the school district. Likewise, we have a lot of resources in the community. And so those have been the 3 points of emphasis that I've made to our faculty. And I will tell you, as we're going through this ever-evolving fluid crisis these last few days, focus on that theme has made a difference for us. That's how we make our decisions. I'm going to hit the arrow button, and I know that one of the questions you asked was transition to superintendent. My PowerPoint's going to be fairly simple, and I'll tell you that my transition to superintendent was easy. And number one is because of our board. We have a wonderful, wonderful school board. They really do look at the question that I raised in that first item, students first. And I appreciate that. And we have 2 board members here, as you all know, Ellie Mitchell and of course your member, Sheila. And that board's been great to me. And it starts from the top, right? You guys know this as you lead organizations. Leadership starts, and success starts at the top with that leadership. So the transition has been easy for me. And part of it's because of what Sheila mentioned, because I've been part of the community for so long, part of our school's community. Every organization tends to have somebody who's the answer person, and that was kind of my role when I was deputy superintendent, right?
That's true.
Right, and so what I have been doing is transitioning to empowering others to develop that ability to get answers themselves. So that's been a big function internally of what I've been doing. Externally, I'm speaking publicly more than I traditionally have, but I often spoke with the county commission. Many of you know that that's the structure in Tennessee. They're our funding body, so we have to present our budget to the county commission. And so a lot of it, as you know as leaders, it's building those relationships. So it's been amazingly good this last year or so as I transitioned from that. I felt like I needed to answer that because you guys had asked that question of me to come. So I got to give a couple of brags, and I'm not gonna mention every one of these on this PowerPoint. And you may not be able to see in the back, but every time I speak, I have to emphasize our students are doing amazing things. You know that. We were having a discussion at the table, and one of my terms from law school is, and many of you may have heard this term, gunners, right? Those students in school who are gunners. Brentwood's full of gunners. Our high schools are full of gunners, and there's a lot of motivation, and it comes from the students. It comes from the students. It comes from parents too, and the teachers have high expectations, but a lot of that drive comes from our students, that they expect that of us. We were having a conversation just a minute ago, and Garrett was talking about AP classes, and what was the term you used to describe the AP class? It was
more engaging.
It was more engaging. He said he chooses AP classes because they're more engaging. That's the attitude that so many of our students have. They're looking for that engagement. They're looking for that push from our faculty because they're pushing themselves. And so part of our success, obviously, is because of our students and the attitude that they take. So I had a few success bullet points. You saw, and I mentioned the reward schools and the ACT composite score of 25.3, highest in Tennessee of any multi-high school district. The school district that actually had the highest ACT score statewide was a one high school district. It's Germantown. It's not Germantown High School. It's actually Houston High School, because Germantown High School is no longer part of Germantown for school purposes. Is that not crazy? They had a bunch of breakups in Memphis.
Welcome to Shelby County.
Yeah, Shelby, exactly. Welcome to Shelby County. That school would have come in fourth in Williamson County in ACT. So I thought that's a neat fact for me. So our students are doing really well. And you see the other 21 out of 145 public school systems receive that highest designation. We received that. Now I will tell you, what we do is we celebrate those successes and we move to the next one. We move to the next year. So we like to mention it, but we don't dwell on it. We mentioned Crockett Elementary. Some of you may have children or grandchildren at Crockett. It's a national blue ribbon school. I got to tell a quick story related to that. I grew up in Metro Atlanta. My wife grew up in Brentwood. My high school, my senior year in 1985, was named a national blue ribbon school, and I drove past my high school last summer, and they still have that sign up. It's a big deal. National Blue Ribbon School is a big deal. And so I felt like it was important, especially in Brentwood, to mention that Crockett received that accolade this year. 32 students so far with a perfect ACT composite score this year. That's scholarship money right there, right? That's helping parents fund their children for the next step. I've got some other additionals here. I'm going to leave it up just a little bit. My next slide, actually, if I'm not mistaken, is related to the coronavirus, so I might just leave up those successes as I talk about it. There may be one other success. Nope, I'm going to go backwards. I'll let you. So I want to tell just as briefly as I can kind of our story and where we've been this past week, where we are and where we're headed. You all are going to get a little bit more detail than I've shared publicly. I actually did a Facebook Live, Carol Birdsong and I did. It was a 38-minute Facebook Live that we had scheduled for 30 minutes. And we actually did it that way because we wanted to make sure we hit all the big questions that parents had asked us. At least, I guess that was the day before yesterday, right? Or was it yesterday?
I think it was yesterday.
It was yesterday. I've lost track. But we've done a Facebook Live that's actually on WCS's Facebook account. I'd invite you to look at it if you haven't. where we addressed a lot of questions about where we are. I'm going to share a little bit more detail with you because there are a couple of items I just didn't feel like were appropriate to share with the world. So here's our story. I got a call last week, it was Thursday morning, from the Commissioner of Education, and she said, Jason, I need to let you know that in just a few minutes, the governor's going to announce that the first confirmed case of COVID-19 has been identified in Tennessee, and it's in Williamson County. And at that point, of course it's Williamson, right? Because we're so active, right? And I actually have been thinking for a few weeks, well, it's going to happen eventually. It's going to happen here. So that notice came in. And she was good enough to give me that heads up, and then just a few minutes later, the governor made that announcement. This is part of what I didn't share publicly. Within just a few minutes, we started having to run on the schools. Parents started showing up in different schools to pick up their children. It's a very frightening thing for parents. Part of it is because it's unknown, right? It's a new virus. There's not an immunization for it. It's a very scary thing to a lot of people, and I think that's in a lot of ways that's a reasonable fear. We have a medical emergency safety plan, and so one of the items in that plan includes us doing a disinfecting cleaning of our buildings when it's identified. Now, the preliminary information we got from that was it was a parent of a Williamson County child. It turns out that wasn't the case. It was a parent of a child who lived in Williamson County. It just happened to be a private school parent. But we have a cleaning process with our custodial contractor to disinfect, and that's what we did. We called it a deep clean, but it included disinfecting. So we in consultation with the EMA office for the county, with the health department for the county, and with the state health department, we determined let's take a couple of days and do some cleaning. We had the days, or inclement weather days, because we have had snow. So we closed Friday and Monday for that cleaning, and it took all of those 4 days to do that disinfecting cleaning. It's a lot of work to mist with a disinfectant in each of the classrooms, etc. So that was through Monday. Monday night, I was at the county commission meeting, and we had found out that a Brentwood parent, and I'm going to share this with you that I didn't tell the whole world. And because this individual has said it's okay to share this, this parent has children at both Brentwood Middle and Brentwood High. This parent said, I've gotten a diagnosis of COVID-19, and I need to let you know. And this person has actually let a lot of their friends know, just real stand-up conversations from this person who received that diagnosis. And if I'm not mistaken, it was because they were out of town and doing some work and came back. And so we started having additional discussions. It really went to about 12:30 at night, past midnight, with the state epidemiologist, with our county folks, with our EMA as well. And in that conversation, the state epidemiologist told us, given the information you have, how could you not close on Tuesday? So we closed. Our health plan includes relying on those healthcare professionals, because the truth is we don't have expertise in these issues. So we made that decision to close on Tuesday. And so the plan was from the state health department for the regional folks who do these investigations to confirm the case and then go through their process and then get back to us later on that next day. So that happened. The regional folks confirmed that that was a positive case. They went through the process of communicating with the individuals who that person had come in contact with, recommending that they self-isolate. And they told us, and by the way, that person had been in our schools. There's some indication that some mild symptoms were exhibited in that individual while they were in our schools, including some pretty significant conversations with teachers and going through the building. That was at Brentwood High. And so we had a conversation the next day, and they said, based on what we've investigated, we feel like we've done our protocols, and you're good to go based on our investigation of this individual for Wednesday school, which was day before yesterday. You see how this is just happening so fast. I mean, it's crazy, right? A lot of things happening all at once. And we had also heard that a student was being tested that had received the test that very day as well, which was Tuesday. So I asked the regional MD, thanks for giving us that information about your investigation here and your conclusion that there was no reason to close school. What if that diagnosis for that student turns out to be a positive? Would you change your recommendation? And the answer was, well, yeah, maybe. And so based on that, we felt like we had to close on Wednesday. Subsequent to that, we had some conversations with the state epidemiologists and others, and the conclusion was, you know what, given where you are, close for the rest of the week, take some time, you've got spring break coming up. And that's the basic story of how we ended up being closed for this whole week. Now, we all know this is a very fluid situation. Fluid, it's water. It's just water running downhill. It is fluid. Every few minutes, something seems to change. I will tell you from my perspective, a tipping point, and I think about this, if you think about your math class as a parabola, you're approaching a limit, you got the limit there. Where that curve really took a sharp turn was when the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. That's when we started seeing a lot of changes nationally, with so many organizations canceling their events. So we're working here locally on addressing those questions and what's most appropriate for our folks. And what's been great is our county health department has been on top of it in communicating with us, and we're relying on those medical experts for the decisions that we make. One of the things also that is in my mind, and by the way, I get on rolls, so somebody tell me when I have to stop, because I know you guys have to leave at 1. I've been in Kiwanis. I have 5 minutes? Okay, so one of the things that sticks in my mind is something that Greg Sankey talked about, the commissioner of the SEC. He said, I hope that we make decisions based on the information we have, the best decisions we can, but when new information comes, we'll make a decision based on that information. And so the theme I've told our folks is, let's make decisions that we have to make, knowing that things might change, the next day, and so we're making decisions in that context. Today and yesterday, my staff has been working on contingency plans for 2 possibilities. One, if we're able to go to school when the spring break ends, what changes are appropriate in our buildings for that plan? They're working on that right now. We're gonna have a share out today at 4 o'clock with our leaders in all those departments and all those areas to talk about how that needs to look, not this coming Monday, but next after spring break is over, about what changes we need in our building based upon where we are, not just in this community, but nationally. The second thing I asked them to look at is, if it turns out we have to close longer term, like so many places are doing right now. As I understand it, we're now at 6 states have shut down schools. What does that look like for us? How much instruction can we provide outside of school? Many of you know that many colleges have shut down. My daughter's a student at Sanford. You talked about Ole Miss just a few minutes ago. A lot of colleges have shut down and said we're all online. It's a very different scenario for public schools, because we have a lot of accountability measures, we have a lot of requirements to meet the standards that are the state standards. We also have special education, where when we have thousands of students with IEPs. The most recent directives we've gotten from the U.S. Department of Ed just came in today, and it didn't surprise me. What they basically said is, if you provide instruction, you still need to provide that instruction for a student's individualized education plan. Many of those plans include direct instruction, direct relationships with the students that may be impossible from a distance learning perspective. But our staff is working on addressing those things. So when more information comes, for those of you who have children in the school system, we'll be communicating over this week, probably late into spring break. Now, I've been talking fast because I used to be president of the Kiwanis Club years ago, and I know those speakers better be done at 1 o'clock. If not, some of you are leaving. So I have 3 more minutes. So Carol, the next thing that I have on the agenda, I probably really won't get into in detail. I'm just going to click on my PowerPoint. We do have a growth issue here in the community, right? You guys know that. Growth is good, but we've got a lot of growth. On average, we are growing by more than 1 school a year. So we're growing by, we're actually projecting somewhere around 1,100 students next year. Our elementary schools seat 890. So over time, on average, as our growth pattern is right now, we need to build more than 1 school a year to keep up with growth. Our county commission has done some really good things to try to plan for that with the way they fund things. Mayor Anderson just this past week actually stepped up and did something unprecedented in my experience, maybe ever in the county. The interest rates as a result, and they were blunt about this at the county commission meeting, as a result of the coronavirus, the interest rates have dropped. And so he actually took to the county commission a plan with a number of our 5-year capital plan long-term projects and said, let's vote to fund this now with bonds so that we can get that low interest rate. And so they've actually voted to fund some items that we haven't even asked for yet as a school board, because they know that interest rate is probably never going to be as low as it was again. So we've got some really good, wise leadership in Williamson County, and I appreciate y'all's support through that. So what, 2 minutes? 1.5? Do we usually do questions?
That's what I was going to say. You've got probably about 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, 5 minutes for questions. Yes, sir, in front.
Because of what we assume will be a hit to tourism and general consumer expenditures, how are you guys beginning, as you are now going into budget season towards the end of the school year, looking at the way the county commission may impact your funding as it relates to a decrease in sales tax collection?
That's a really good question. So we actually had our budget meeting scheduled for yesterday, and we had so much going on that we haven't had that meeting. Our board's had our draft budget for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. They've asked a lot of questions. I will tell you that our original projection from our finance director was, because of growth, because of the raise, because of those issues, she had projected we were probably going to be about 4 million short originally based on what she had. But then after that, the sales tax numbers for last month came in and they were really good. And so she's now projecting that we're going to be close to okay, but I do believe that if there's a possibility, we're going to get really high sales numbers this month. Because everybody's, run a panic on the grocery stores. So I don't know how much sales tax we get for toilet paper, but I think that's going to go up. But we do worry, we are concerned, what does that mean for month 2, right? And month 3 as we finish out this fiscal year. So that is a possibility. We are constantly battling that issue. The county commission, we really do try to do a needs budget that also has a strategic plan element to it, because we do need to continue to grow and get better. So our finance director is working with the county finance director. One of the things that we believe is likely to happen is that raise that the county is giving is probably going to be consumed in next year's budget after the budget vote. In other words, there's a roll. I can get into tons of detail, but one example is the state requires us to have a 3% fund balance, 3% of our total budget that's not designated for anything as we start the year. But on July 2, the second day of our fiscal year, you can use that fund balance. Often when the county commission is dealing with things like property tax rates and sales tax fluctuations, they might fund something in the subsequent year. So that's a possibility. Yes, sir.
What do you estimate, your best guess estimate of the cost of the virus year to date?
That's an excellent question. I tell you, the question is, what do we estimate is the cost of the virus year to date? For WCS, the additional contract work, which we actually have a provision in our custodial contract, that's an actual number. We haven't gotten the invoice yet, but we talked about, because we do have a contract defining it, we believe that the total cost for the extra disinfecting that we've initiated is probably going to be $60,000 to $80,000. That's a raw number. Answer to your question. At this stage, we haven't had any additional money, actual budget items pulled out. We've had a lot of time, right? And so we're working on balancing, spending the appropriate time for this with making sure we still do our strategic work. I expect it'll go up. I think for a lot of entities, those numbers are going to go up. You talk about the lost money from for example, the tournament, the SEC tournament in Nashville. Guys, I can't even project that. Those are some questions that they're going to have to address. There's going to be some sales tax impact on that because of hotels. The hotel tax is a really big revenue source for all communities because it's higher than the standard sales tax. And at the finance level, a week in from the first confirmed diagnosis in this community, I don't know a full answer to that. Sorry, you next, and then we'll hit that one.
I had a question about that House bill that's basically trying to create open borders.
Thank you very much. So one of the other questions that you all asked me to address, there's a Senate and House bill that was actually submitted by Senator Nicely out of East Tennessee that mandated schools receive students from out of county if they have room. With that I'm just going to say, with that being poorly defined. And I tell you, what's going to happen in Williamson County? We know, right? We know. And from a funding perspective, the way schools are funded, for Williamson County, the bulk of our funding comes from you all, comes from the county. There's other counties in the state where the bulk of their funding comes from the state. There's what I describe as a Robin Hood effect, right? They base it on a formula which is ability to pay. So Williamson County spends more money at the county level than the state level because of that ability to pay formula. If that passes, that's a blow up change for us. It's a massive, massive change. I'll tell you that Jack Johnson has been really good to keep us informed. He's our senator. He's been working both in the scenes and behind the scenes to address that. I'm really encouraged about where that's headed based on the conversations I've had with both Jack Johnson and our state reps. And so it passed the Senate, the House. It hasn't made it out of committee. For practical purposes, if a bill doesn't make it out of committee, it's been killed. I'm encouraged that, and we'll know next week whether it makes it out of committee. But the stories I've heard have been that there's enough upheaval because of the funding model in Tennessee that I'm hoping that's not going to pass. One last question. I'm sorry.
That's fine, go right ahead.
You mentioned about online education being a
Yeah.
challenge. If schools were closed for a month,
Yeah.
will you extend into June, or I mean, some of us might plan a vacation or something. That kind of thing.
But and a lot of vacations are planned a year in advance, right?
Right.
My family goes to Sevierville, every Christmas, and if you don't rent that house on the hill, a year ahead, you're out of luck, right? So there's a couple of possibilities if it goes long. One is that school systems might have to extend their year. Another possibility is that the state may waive some requirements. The governor has declared a state of emergency, and that includes eliminating his obligation to follow a number of laws. So we don't know the whole scope of that yet. Our Commissioner of Ed has scheduled a 2 p.m. phone conference today with superintendents, and I'm hoping that that's part of what we get from the Commissioner of Ed. The state of Tennessee also has obligations to the U.S. Department of Education through what's called the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, which was a means for the state to receive money from the federal government in return for some obligations, which include some of the testing. And so there's a possibility the state may have to go to the federal government. We just don't know yet. Those are those items that are in flux. For just a couple of days here and there have been school systems in the state who've run out of inclement weather days that they have to extend just a couple of days into the summer from time to time. At the moment, we have 3 remaining inclement weather days because we budgeted 10 into our calendar. But I believe statewide there may likely have to be some waivers if things continue to progress at this rate, right? So, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Jason, for speaking with us, and thank you for coming today. I know you've got a lot on your plate, you're dealing with a whole lot, and it means a lot that you're here. We really appreciate it. That being said, I'm going to ask you to sign this book that we will read to Lipscomb students or other students in the county. And this one is actually, I think, appropriate. The pigeon has to go to school.
I know this book. I've read this book.
So we would love for you to do that, and we can share about your conversation with us today. Everybody, please, please, please pay attention and read your reflections. Your board of directors is going to be meeting on Tuesday to discuss the next 45 days in regards to our club and different events and different things we have going on. So we'll be communicating that way. I'll also send emails through Club Runner, but just please make sure you read those reflections. With that, I'm asking that everybody help put up tables and chairs after the meeting.
Leave the chairs.
Nope, put up tables and leave the chairs. Thank you to Leadership Brentwood for joining us. Thank you to the Hollands and our school board. We really appreciate it, and there's no other business for the good of Rotary.
Sarah, real quick,
There is business for the good of Rotary.
There's about 3 or 4 box lunches left. If anybody could use those, take them home for tomorrow, whatever. Take them.
All right. And